Good evening. Good evening. Thank you all so much for joining in a new month, new focus, right? So, really quickly, introducing myself again, Anika of Holistic Fluency. You all so excited about November because in November we are reclaiming our sanity, right? When it comes to differentiation, a lot of times it just becomes a really stressful topic, one of those buzzwords sometimes people just kind of throw out. Sometimes it feels like busy work. But we want to be clear this evening, today, that more levels should not mean more late nights. That's not the goal. That's not what we're here for. So let me share my screen. I actually put together a couple of visuals for you all this evening. Hey, good evening, good evening. Uh-oh, look, it's still present. There we go. So we're taking it from the top. Okay. So again, the goal is that by the end, you'll have at least strategies and one AI trick so you can scaffold smarter and not harder, all right? While we're really getting into a couple of things, I want you all to let me know what is one thing that stresses you the most about differentiation? What is one thing that stresses you the most about differentiation? And let's see, I have a couple of symbols and things we can use as well. So I already told y'all who I am, what I do. Okay. Because we're having a real conversation today, making sure we're super clear about that. And definitely real teacher talk, real educator talk this evening. What is one thing that stresses you about differentiation? So while y'all are thinking, y'all let me know if any of this sounds familiar. So we've done a lot of research and the main stressors, if you will, right, for differentiation, connected to differentiation tends to fall into about four buckets. One, that time and workload, number one, right? Because you're planning multiple pathways or different tasks for every assignment, every time you have to do something, right? Maybe it is managing groups in real time because the pacing may be different. You might have to think differently about your transitions and then just overall the equity of who gets your attention, when, how frequently, all that kind of stuff. Also, your assessment alignment, making sure that, yes, we're differentiating, but that the scaffolds, right, the different tiers that we build in, that it still meets the requirement for grade level rigor, that they're going to get where they need to be, that we're not just keeping them at a certain level because that scaffolding is built in like that. So maybe it is this fourth bucket, just keeping your students motivated, right? And engagement gaps. So sometimes learners are disengaged when, right, they're having a hard time with material. They check out, they'll shut down. So all these things, all these plates are spinning, all these different pieces of the puzzle that can definitely impact differentiation. Really quickly though, I did want to tell you this story. So early, very early in my education career, a district was really leaning heavily into differentiation, right? Because there were some things going on where obviously student progress and student growth is always important, but it was one of those moments like we have to hit it this year. So the goal was to differentiate, to grow everyone. So meeting students where they were, to grow them from there. So that resulted in literally every week, every day, every period, I had three versions of every task, every assignment, and often still ended up reteaching, right? All three, right? So just all this constant, that's what then at the time, that was my understanding of what differentiation meant. That was how it was best explained to me at the time, that just making sure you meet them where they are, right? We build in these different aspects, these different goals for the different groups. When in reality, I wasn't differentiating, y'all. I was just duplicating stuff. Like, well, how can this group do it? How can they do it? What about this group? And again, I want to be clear that while we're talking about differentiation, we're also going to spend some time talking about what it is not, because a lot of bad habits at times, right? So, a lot of bad habits at times may have been picked up for what we think differentiation is. So, someone said it seems like more work at first blush. Definitely. And the way it is presented and often the look fors, if you will, it is more work at first, right? Until we dig into it a little more deeply and have some clear understanding of how it can look, but especially this evening, how AI can support us in that. But definitely, it definitely does. All right. So while we're talking about, again, those four buckets, one thing that I found though, just research being, like literally online, going through some articles, but also obviously observation, lived experience, talking to people, working with people, that those four stressors for differentiation show up a bit differently at the different grade levels, grade bands. For example, in elementary, if you teach elementary, your stress may center around centers, for one, maybe taking longer to prep or longer than teaching, right? Because, okay, if I'm doing centers to differentiate some, right, it's going to take longer than, okay, everybody just kind of getting the lesson. Slash, maybe figuring out how much to stretch those high flyers without losing the rest of the class, and when to stretch them. So that's how it can show up, some stress at elementary level. Middle grades, maybe middle school folks, maybe your challenge has been more so like the balancing that pacing guide with a room to address every every reading level and every reasoning level, because literally at middle school we're dealing with both that much more, right? Where are they mathematically, but also how much is their reading level impacting how they're experiencing their math level, and balancing that with the pacing guide where you're supposed to be. Slash, maybe when your scaffold gets labeled as, oh, this is the baby version, I don't want that one, right? When the kids are, why did I get this one? So that might be an issue. Slash, high school, it gets a little more interesting, a little more spicy. Maybe your biggest stressors around differentiation might sound like, well, I just have 30 Algebra 2 students. They have 15 different skill gaps, and I'm trying to keep rigor going without spending the weekend rewriting every quiz. Rewriting every quiz being like what I was telling y'all from my early years, right? Just having to do each, right? That's what I had learned early in my education career, that it was each task had to have basically three different tiers, three different roles, like three completely different approaches. That was what I learned differentiation was early on. But you learn, you live, and you learn some more, right? So I definitely learned better. So that's, again, one of the things I'm sharing with you this evening. So insightful at differentiation at the various grade levels. Yes, well, the four big buckets are the same, but it shows up a little bit differently. Definitely shows up because you're dealing with different classroom arrangements, different development levels, just on the social side, the cognitive side. So yeah, there's a few variables in play for sure. So I want you all to tap in. If these were our four things, we kind of went through the different grade bands. What is your personal opinion? Feel free to use the symbols, right? You can say the clock, if it's that time, planning the multiple versions, right? A target, a bullseye, just keeping the groups locked in, keeping them engaged. That's an issue for differentiation. Maybe the puzzle piece, just aligning scaffolds, right? To make sure it stays on grade level. And it's not the baby version, right? Someone's laughing, but that happens, right? When they start to kind of recognize the things, they know they need support, they look around at their friends' papers versus theirs, right? Slash the scale, managing readiness and motivation. And being clear. So you see, even in the list, that engagement and motivation are two different things. We'll talk about that some this month, though. Engagement versus motivation. Someone says same. That's what I was taught regarding differentiation. So that's almost worth it. Y'all know I'm a nerd. That's almost worth going back to study. Like, well, who first started that approach? Why did that paint the country right that way? But again, now we know better, so we can do better. So we're leaning into that. But y'all let me know what has been your personal experience that has been the biggest stressor for you when it comes to differentiation. Let me give you a little bit of time. Okay. So someone checked in and said maybe the puzzle piece. So aligning scaffolds to the grade level rigor. And that's a big deal. That's a very big deal, right? Because y'all know, because I'm talking about math. So imagine, we're working on ratios, which are like kind of grown up fractions a little bit, but someone's having a hard time with fractions, the initial setup. But I have to still make sure I get that person all the way to ratios and proportional reasoning, right? But we're still working on setting up the fraction. Okay, someone else said time. Yeah, planning multiple versions. So it doesn't have to fully be multiple versions. That's what we're going to talk about, just other ways. And even within differentiation, y'all this is going to sound, y'all going to say, oh my goodness. So there's aspects to differentiate inside of differentiation, right? We kind of think about the one thing, and the reality is if we were doing absolutely different versions, absolutely different tasks each time, we were differentiating the product. Product is one way to differentiate. There's really three. And we're going to talk about the three of them throughout the month. It's a long conversation, so we're going to talk about one part tonight. Okay, here we go. Cool. Y'all, really, when we're talking about the different sources of stress, these different things, I want you to really understand, though, that a lot of it is locked to myths that we're dealing with, right? Because a lot of us learned that, and someone co-signed it for me already, that differentiation was just kind of color-coded chaos. It was like, okay, color code this, highlight that, take this part away, do. But we've been told to meet the students where they are, but we weren't told how to do it without losing where we're supposed to be, right? Then maybe some students finished in the wrong order, right? They found a challenge version, the extension online, so they were able to answer that part. All of this, y'all. So I would especially say the part about growing the students that maybe finish a little early. Personally, every now and again, I was that student, especially in elementary school. And I'm going to tell y'all what I learned as a student. And I would chuckle when I would hear about it as a teacher, hearing how students reacted in other teachers' classes. Tell me if this is you, if this was you, or if you heard it happen. Miss Jones, I'm finished. Right? You finished answering the odd numbers 13 through 35. Yes, ma'am. Okay, now go do the even. Let me know if you had that experience or if you heard that happen to someone. You heard of that scenario, right? Someone finished early, they were done. And the teacher said, okay, cool. And they gave them more work to do. Let me know if that was you, / if you heard that happen to someone. So, and I mean, and y'all are learning me some. I know some people know me well on here, and some people y'all are just learning me through YouTube land. Yeah, I can be a little honoring. So, guess what I learned? In elementary school, I learned just to slow down. I was like, rush for what? For her to give me some more work? For him to give me some more work? No. Let me just pretend like I'm not done. Let me wait. Let me sit on this last question for 20 minutes till everybody else is almost done. Whatever it took to not have to get more work. That was my takeaway, because that was an inadequate response, right? Instead of, okay, well, she's finishing, let's see something to extend, they had me do it again. I already showed you I knew what to do. Why make me do the same exact thing? Why make me do the same exact thing and I just showed you I know how to do it this way? Why not challenge me by giving me a different way to explain or to show? I just had to say that, y'all. Right. So that was one of my own personal goals for sure. When I started hearing about this differentiation thing, I was like, I know what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to give someone that finishes early and they nailed it. They're not going to have to do it twice. We're going to figure out something else. That was one of my little teacher pledges to myself. One of my first things. I was like, that's what we're not doing. Okay. So speaking of getting into these myths, you all, when we're talking about the myth of differentiation, it's a few things that come up. Again, more versions. That's not differentiation. You're just doing more versions. Some of them are rigorous, some are not. When you create tiers, right, y'all? We thought we were cute. They had us name each tier like after a certain mascot, right? So we could kind of talk in code about it as adults, Say, okay, so how's your bison group doing? Okay, how's your centurion group doing? What about your falcons? Yeah. So just so we could talk about it in code. But the reality is, tiering, it is not the same thing as leveling, right? If we want tiers, the tiers should really be, okay, this is when we're developing the skill. Now they're pretty much nailing it. Then step 3, extending them. But when you think about it as educators, that's not at all how we would approach the tiers. It wouldn't be, okay, it's developing, they're on, and then this is the extension, and everyone passes through, right? Well, possibly. Most of your class passes through the 3 tiers. It was like, all right, we know these kids are going to be in this tier. These kids are going to be in this middle one. And these kids will more than likely be in this 3rd tier. Besides that, that's also not taken into account. Therefore, remember we talked about the different areas of math, right? Those 4 different areas, like geometry versus the algebra side versus like the tables and graphs versus like, adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. That switches. Students have different strengths in different areas that need development. So to randomly, I'm saying randomly, but to put you in a tier and expect you to stay there for all the material is not accurate. It's not valid. Okay, it's not reasonable, right? Because a student can be super strong in their algebra side, their data side, their number side, but when it comes to geometry, they're like, I'm sorry, what? Can you start over? And she is me. Okay, I'm talking about myself. You all. So again, there's a lot of things, a lot of honestly assumptions and myths that are surrounding differentiation, and that's what we're working on. Okay. So we want to make sure that while we're talking about the support, that we're not oversimplifying, the issue. Because we still need it to be on grade level. We still need to be rigorous. So when we're providing support, that does not mean that we're taking away the challenge, even if there's a certain support in place, right? Someone said sometimes it felt like busy work. It did. And guess what? Being a little bit funny, I don't know if you're talking about on the teacher side or the student side. How about that? Which one were you talking about just then? So one of the goals, we're specifically talking about leverage over levels. And so the things that we're going to leverage. So the shift is differentiation is about leverage versus levels. So thinking about what gives your kids traction to keep going, right? What allows them to continue to move through their learning process. Like we said, it's developing, then they nailed it. Okay, let's apply it and extend it. Like you're really, really leaned in at that point. What gives them the traction so they can keep escalating, right? So they can accelerate through that learning path. So these are the things we're going to lean into. We're focusing on, again, the 3 areas. So we can differentiate the content, which that is where a lot of us begin it in, right? The content. Okay, so I'm going to take this out of this person's paper. I'm going to add a couple more, maybe this side, right? So the process or the product, the end result, how their learning is demonstrated, right? I mean, we can definitely work through that. There's several ways to work through that. Several ways. We need to keep in mind that sometimes this is lost, that the goal is the same. The goal does not move, right? But if we're talking about differentiation for real, a lot of times the target moved. Well, I just need them to get this part and show, so that child never moves from the development to the grade level, to the enrichment and extension part, right? They may stay here because that's what the expectation was. That is what was presented to them and how it was presented to them. But really, when it comes to differentiation, we have three different ways, these three different areas that we can enter, right? And have a child enter their learning pathway: content, process, and product. Y'all, earlier when I had you all talk about your stress, right? What did you associate most, the stress you associated with the most for differentiation? Guess what? For all of those, let me go back to show, just in case anybody missed it. Whether you talked about time, whether you talked about keeping the groups engaged, aligning the scaffold so it can be on grade level, or just balancing readiness plus motivation. All of that is a systems thing. All of that is a systems issue. I'm gonna let y'all sit with that for a minute. We're gonna talk about it, but all of it is a systems thing. So because there's three levels, three aspects within differentiation, again, that's a lot. It's a big conversation, but we're talking about today the process scaffolding, the process side. So the supports that make learning stick, again, without changing the goal. Yeah, the goal is to not change the goal. Well, as long as they can get to their eights, as long as they can get to the nines for their multiplication facts, and they have their multiplication chart for the rest, or maybe they can. The goal is the goal, so we need to make sure we're not changing it. So if the goal is to analyze data, one group I know I cracked a joke about color coding earlier, but they might have a color coded data set, right? Another might create visuals, and then another might generate some insights using AI. And we're going to talk about how to do that, because again, all of this is levels. We're building to that. We're building into it. So when you're thinking about something that you teach often, just one task, one aspect of what you teach, what process scaffolds would make it more accessible, since we're focusing on process scaffolding? On the elementary side, and I'll just give you a couple. I'm going to make, I have a couple of lists, a few resources we're going to talk about, but there's some more coming throughout the month for November as we're leaning really, really into differentiation. But at the elementary level, maybe you're thinking, okay, so when I teach multi-digit subtraction, especially when it's ending in zeros, I could use color-coded place values so the students can actually see the regrouping, right? Instead of just hearing me talk about it, so they can see what's happening. Maybe you have, right? You're doing some of the I forget what it's called. Y'all know what I'm talking about. This a specific organization that supports AVID, right? Maybe y'all are an AVID campus and everyone is doing writing across the curriculum, right? So maybe you have your students write a lot, but you're thinking, you know what? It would be helpful if maybe I gave them some sentence stems. First, I noticed. Next, I tried, just to help them structure their reasoning, because they're doing okay with the reasoning, but the sequencing is off. So we support the sequence. See how that's a process thing, right? Still at elementary, for fact fluency, maybe we could build partner routines where students explain strategies out loud before they check them with flashcards. So they're able to demonstrate and explain multiple ways. The middle school level, a task you teach often, what process scaffold could make it more accessible? So for proportional reasoning, maybe even before students start to solve, we have a sort. We're doing a sorting activity. What makes sense? What does not make sense? Because a lot of times for middle school life, middle school math, it is proportional reasoning, and we need them to look for patterns. So if they're able to sort, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense, and we're explaining why, they're well on their way to nailing that goal without moving the goal, right? So maybe you have students preload, right? You preload the vocabulary. So when we're talking about scale factor, constant of proportionality, they have some anchor charts, some visuals. They're locked in. They understand what it means, which helps as they're working through the process, through the content. High school level, for word problems, we have students maybe draw the relationships first, label a diagram before they begin to work on the problem. If it's a triangular prism they're working on, they're labeling the vertices, the bases, the faces, right? In geometric proofs, we give sentence starters. If, then, to help build their logical flow. So we see how here we're able to add in specific things that help and support their process, right? Because the end result, the goal is still the same. Y'all let me know if that makes sense. I know we got really technical, right? For the different grade levels or grade bands, but I want to make sure everyone heard something that was familiar to them. So the fact fluency for elementary, definitely, definitely. For the fact fluency, one of the biggest things is that a lot of times students nail multiplication, right? They get used to the arrays, they equal groups, they understand representing it as repeated addition. But when it's time for division, they're like, whoa, hey, I don't know what this is. So just even starting the connection as a, and I'm laughing that I made fun of color coding, but colors do help depending on how we're using them, right? They can be effective, but making sure that they see that when we're doing fact families, that first multiplication and division are cousins, they're related. They have two sides of the family. There's a multiplication side, there's a division side, right? And that if I'm doing a multiplication fact like 4 times 6 equals 24, that each member of the family, because they're connected, because they're related, that each of the facts in that fact family are going to have those same 3 numbers. So that's one thing that I show a lot to young people, to third graders usually, when they're starting their multiplication and division, right? Where they see the relationship, like, oh, like each number has its own color. So they're sitting there, we're looking, we're building. They're like, but all the only thing that happened was the product, the total from the multiplication problem became the beginning of the division problem. Yes, because now we have the total and we're seeing how many equal groups went into making that total, right? So we're connecting the visual literally by building, right, the rows and columns, but also by color coding it. So if we talked about 4 times 6 equal 24, then 30 should be nowhere on this paper because that's not a part of the family. So that even gives them another way to focus on the understanding and connection between the numbers, right? Labeling changes the game. Definitely, definitely, especially when it comes to the geometry side. That's been very successful working with students on geometry aspects, especially as they're getting used to the formulas, right? Because the formulas get a bit intense in middle school and high school when you're doing volume, area, surface area, all of that. It gets different. It's not just length times width anymore. Not at all. Definitely. All right. Yes, yes. I'm glad to hear y'all chiming in. But again, y'all, that's something, and for some people, you may do that as part of your initial lesson, right? Your initial rollout. But the thing to consider, the thing to focus on is, did everyone even understand and properly even apply the labeling? Did they label it correctly? Does that need to be revisited with these couple the group for that? So again, not to say, oh no, you're still reteaching, but making sure that the students are getting what they need, making sure that it's there first. Again, the different levels. If we have specific checkpoints, thinking about it that way more so. Specific checkpoints along the way to mastering this task. Okay, boom, this group is here. This group is at the rest stop. This group is a little bit further up the road. It's specific checkpoints along the way on the road, making sure that they nail each level of it. We might start at different points, but everybody's going to the same destination. That's where we have to lock in. That's where we have to nail in. Lean in, excuse me. All right, so talking about tech now. Y'all know I wasn't going to go without talking about tech a bit because I do truly believe in using AI to leverage how our young people are learning, right? Not just for our administrative task as adults and as educators. So we're going to talk tech a bit because the right AI prompt can save you 45 minutes of prep. It can. So we have 3 prompts here I'm showing you. One, generate 3 scaffolded versions of this math problem by readiness level. And it's done. Let me just sit that right there for a moment. And it's done. 2, if you put this prompt in, simplify this task for a student still developing academic English, right? As math educators, as educators, you know, period, that the students are going to learn their casual English first, right? They're going to be able to talk to their friends. But we want to make sure they're also being supported as they are developing in their academic English. And I don't care how people like to say, well, math, you know, math is universal. Math has its own language. Y'all, all the vocabulary students are expected to know and apply and recognize for certain type situations, certain operations. Math has its own language, so we need to cut that out. It's universal. Numbers, writing numbers, but we need to cut out that is universal and everyone's going to understand at any time. Okay. So, 3, create a reflection question for students who finish early. And y'all understand, if you were here the whole time, you know why that's near and dear to my heart. Create a reflection question. I don't have to do the even numbers. I can just write a little more about what we learned. I can write something down and show you. I can create something and show you. I don't have to do the other side. Thank you kindly. Thank you so much. Right? So, you all, again, the right prompt can save you 45 minutes of prep time. With that in mind, I want to be sure that you understand that AI helps you plan support, not shortcuts. It helps you plan support so that on the checkpoints, on that road where we're all going to the same place, that there's not shortcuts to get there, but maybe this group needed the map, but this group already had their navigation system set, so they're good. They're on their way by themselves. But this group needed the map right here, right? So that's a support. So we're giving them the supports they need so we all get to the same place. Just as an example, using that same one of the prompts we just looked at, right? Prompt number 1, readiness level 1, right? Instead of just find the volume of the figure, it goes into the 3 steps, the 3 layers. Level 1, the students will do this. Level 2, they'll do that. Level 3, y'all, it's about work. It's, yes, we're working, but it's smarter structure. It's smarter structure, right? We're definitely working with smarter structure. What do you mean when you say the conjecture? So a couple of things I'm sharing here. A couple of things while we continue to just kind of wrap up, get into differentiation. I have some stuff for you. Being clear that while we're thinking about differentiation, it should create calm and not chaos, right? When you focus on scaffolds that support thinking, not just did you get the task done, right? They're actually supporting thinking. Engagement is going to happen naturally. Engagement is going to show up. So if you've been carrying some guilt of feeling like maybe you aren't differentiating enough, please just breathe. Please just breathe, because differentiation is about clarity, not quantity, right? So, a couple of things. You all, if this resonated with you tonight, we're releasing a variety of math educator resources specifically designed with you in mind. One of the resources being our mini resource toolkit, which is a glimpse, just a glimpse, y'all, of our full layered, supportive, AI-powered assessment toolkit, which that toolkit gets deep into our work, much deeper. And it really completely shifts the experience of you and your students for and with AI. It does. It's absolutely different than how most people are using it. And so we're very proud of that. You'll get ready to use scaffolds, prompts, scripting, refinements. Like, do this if you want this. If you need it to be Very specific examples, the works, you all. And I'm going to drop that link in just a moment. But also because November is about simplifying your systems. Remember, we said differentiation, a lot of it is about systems and those 3 touch points within your system. I've opened some limited November strategy call spots. So we'll customize your approach there. Okay. So I want you to grab your slot now. It's going to be pinned below in the comments. Give me just a moment to drop it. Uh-oh, that part of my computer is going slow. Let's see. But while I'm getting that together, y'all, please let me know your comments, your questions, if anything in particular resonated with you this evening. Okay, so first, here is to get your mini resource toolkit. There's your link there. Second, right? This is the general link for a couple things. The general link to our store, our website. One, we have some free resources about questioning there for educators. But two, if you're like, you know what, Anika, I do want some support refining my approach using AI, you'll find that there. So all of our educator resources are at the top. So having students explain their thoughts by writing a conjecture, definitely. So definitely, yes, yes. So all these different ways, right? These different ways to make sure we're at the target, we at least meet or exceed is the goal, that we at least meet the target and then allow our students to grow and move on from there. But yes, again, both of those links, you have some free resources there and some opportunity for some personalized support. So for that, again, it's only specific times for our November educator strategy spots. So make sure you lock yours in, okay? Yeah, while we're working on differentiation, make sure that you differentiate smarter, not harder. Scaffolds are for you as much as it is for them, as much. I will see you all next Sunday. Again, this month is about differentiation. So far what we've done, we focused on the process side. We still have content and product to do. So I'll see you next week while we lean in more to those areas. All right. Bye-bye. Y'all have a good night.